Welcome to Once Upon English.
Have you ever dreamed of a place that felt too real to be just a dream? A place where forgotten memories live, waiting for someone brave enough to remember them again? Today, you'll step into that place with Elliot, a boy who found a library hidden deep inside his own dreams. And what he discovered there changed his life forever. Welcome, my dear friend, to another magical English story. This one is unlike anything you've ever heard before. It's full of mystery, emotion, and imagination. A story that will help you improve your English while exploring the deepest corners of the human mind. The Whisper That Called His Name. There was once a boy named Elliot who lived in a small, fog-covered town at the edge of the world. It was the kind of town where nothing ever changed, the same gray sky every morning, the same silent streets, and the same tired faces passing by each other without a word. Elliot was quiet, too. He spent most of his days at the old public library, a place no one else seemed to care about anymore. The walls smelled like time, and the books were covered in a thin layer of dust, like snow that had forgotten to melt. While other kids laughed and played in the sun, Elliot read about other worlds. He read about oceans that could sing, trees that could remember, and cities built on clouds. But every time he closed a book, reality felt colder. Sometimes, when he walked home under the dim yellow lights, he felt like the world around him was slowly falling asleep, and only he was still awake. Then, one night, something strange happened. It was late, and the town was quiet, except for the sound of rain hitting his window. Elliot couldn't sleep. He turned on his small lamp and reached for his notebook. He wanted to write, but his mind was empty. He just stared at the blank page, listening to the rain. And then he heard it. A whisper, soft, distant, almost impossible to notice, but it called his name. Elliot. He looked around. No one was there. The whisper came again, a little louder this time. The lamp flickered. His heartbeat quickened. He stood up, walked to the window, and saw nothing but fog. Still, the voice continued, calling softly through the mist. Come and see. And before he knew it, his eyelids grew heavy. The world blurred. The rain turned into silver light. When he opened his eyes again, he was standing in a corridor made of clouds. The floor beneath him shimmered like glass, and endless shelves stretched into the horizon. Each one was filled with glowing books, floating gently, whispering, breathing. At the far end of the corridor, a sign hung in the air, shining faintly. The Library of Forgotten Dreams. Elliot took a step forward. The air smelled like rain and ink. Every whisper around him seemed alive, full of memories, voices, and emotions. He reached out and touched one of the books. It was warm, almost pulsing like a heartbeat. On the cover, he read, The Dream of the Girl Who Spoke to Birds. He opened it slowly, and the world around him disappeared. The Dream of the Girl Who Spoke to Birds. When Elliot opened the glowing book, everything around him dissolved. The shelves, the clouds, the light, all melted away. He felt wind on his face. Warm sunlight touched his skin. He was standing in a wide green field. The sky above was endless and blue, and hundreds of birds flew in slow circles, singing in voices that didn't sound quite real. In the middle of the field, a girl stood with her arms open. The birds surrounded her like a living crown. They whispered in her ears, and she smiled as if she understood every single word. Elliot watched, amazed. He wanted to speak, but before he could, the girl turned her head. Her eyes were bright, like morning light after rain. "You can see me," she said softly. "No one has seen me for years." Her voice was calm, like the wind through feathers. Elliot didn't know what to say. "Who are you?" "I am a dream," she replied. "Someone once dreamed of me long ago. But they forgot." She looked up at the sky where the birds circled higher. "When they forgot me, the birds lost their song. I've been waiting here, alone, ever since the birds cried above her, their wings shining gold for a moment and then fading again into gray." Elliot's heart ached. He wanted to help, but he didn't understand how. The girl stepped closer. "You don't belong here," she said. "You come from the waking world." "How do you know?" Elliot asked. "Because your eyes still move," she said with a soft smile. "Dreamers' eyes never move. They are made of stillness." Elliot looked down at his hands. They were faint, like shadows under sunlight. He was fading. "You can't stay long," the girl whispered. "But maybe you can remember me." "If you remember, I will live again, not here, but in someone's mind." She took his hand and pressed something into it, a single glowing feather. "When you wake up," she said, "write about me. Tell my story. That's how you keep a dream alive." The world began to tremble. Wind rushed across the field. The birds rose into the sky, carrying their songs into light. Elliot tried to hold on, but the sound became too bright, too strong, and suddenly he was falling. He gasped and found himself back in the library. The book in his hands closed itself and turned to dust. But the feather was still there, small, golden, and shining faintly in his palm. For the first time, Elliot understood. These were not ordinary books. Each one was a forgotten dream, waiting for someone to remember. And somehow, the library had chosen him to do it. He looked around. The shelves stretched endlessly, whispering, breathing, calling softly in 1,000 voices. Somewhere, deep inside, he felt both fear and wonder. He took a slow breath and began walking again. The Librarian of the Mist. Elliot walked slowly between the glowing shelves. Every step echoed softly, like footsteps in a dream. The air was cool and silver, filled with quiet whispers that seemed to call his name. He still held the golden feather from the first dream. It was warm in his hand, pulsing like a tiny heartbeat. He didn't know where he was going, only that the library itself seemed alive, gently guiding him forward. After a while, he reached a wide hall where the shelves curved in a circle around a single desk. The desk was made of glass and light, and on top of it lay an open book that wrote itself, line by line in glowing letters. And behind that desk stood a girl. Her hair looked like smoke, her eyes like the first light before dawn. She wore a long gray dress that moved as if it were made of mist. When she saw him, she smiled. "I was wondering when you would arrive," she said softly. Elliot froze. "Who are you?" "I'm the librarian," she said. "I take care of forgotten dreams." Her voice was calm but deep, the kind of voice that sounded like it had existed forever. Elliot looked around. "What is this place?" "This," she said, spreading her arms, "is where dreams come when they are forgotten. People leave their dreams behind when they grow up, or when life becomes too heavy. The library keeps them safe, waiting for someone to remember." Elliot frowned. "And why me?" The librarian tilted her head slightly. "Because you still listen," she said. "Most people stop listening when they wake up, but you still hear the whispers." She walked closer and looked at the golden feather in his hand. "Ah," she said softly. "You opened your first dream. The girl who spoke to birds. She asked me to remember her." The librarian's expression grew gentle. "Then you already understand the first rule of this place. A dream dies only when it's forgotten. Remembering brings it back to life." She reached into the open book on her desk and pulled out a small golden key. "This is for you," she said, placing it in his palm. "It opens one special book. Your book." "My book?" "Yes," she said. "Everyone has one. It holds the dream they lost first." Elliot stared at the key. It glowed softly in his hand, just like the feather. "But be careful," the librarian added, her eyes darkening a little. "Once you open it, you must finish the dream. If you don't, it will fade forever, and so will a part of you." A quiet wind moved through the shelves, making the books tremble like they were breathing. The librarian turned back to her desk. "Now, go. The library will guide you." Elliot took a deep breath and looked around again. The air shimmered, and paths of light opened before him. Countless corridors leading to endless dreams. He tightened his fingers around the key and whispered to himself, "Then I'll find my book." And as he took his first step forward, the lights above him flickered like stars, and the library began to hum with life. The Man Who Spoke in Shadows. The next evening, Oliver couldn't sleep. He kept hearing whispers in his head, words that weren't his own. They told him to go back, to look beneath the floor. At 2 a.m., he got up, trembling but determined. The moonlight was silver and sharp, slicing through his curtains. He followed the whispers down the stairs, into the kitchen, and then to the small wooden door that led to the basement. The air grew colder with every step. His breath came out in white puffs. When he reached the bottom, he turned on the old lamp and froze. There, standing in the corner, was a tall man dressed in black. His face was hidden beneath a wide hat, but his presence filled the room like a dark fog. Oliver stammered, "Who are you?" The man didn't answer. Instead, he raised one pale hand and pointed toward the floorboards. His voice was deep and hollow, like it came from another world. "Find what's buried before they find you." Oliver's heart thundered. He wanted to run, but his legs wouldn't move. "What do you mean? Who are they?" he asked. The man tilted his head slowly. "They never forget," he said softly, "and they never forgive." Then, in the blink of an eye, the lamp flickered, and the man was gone. Oliver fell to his knees, gasping for air. He tore open the floorboards with shaking hands until his fingers hit something solid. It was an old, rusted box wrapped in chains. He dragged it into the light, his mind racing. Should he open it? Or should he bury it again and pretend he never saw it? But curiosity was stronger than fear. He grabbed a hammer and smashed the lock open. Inside, there was a mirror, but not a normal one. As he looked into it, his reflection smiled back. Before he did. The book that remembered him. Oliver stood frozen, staring at the book in his trembling hands. The air around him shimmered, not with light, but with memory. The shelves seemed to lean closer, listening. I wrote this?" he whispered. His voice cracked, like someone trying to remember a song they once loved. "Yes," the whisper replied softly. "You wrote it before you forgot who you were." A chill ran down his spine. "Forgot who I was?" The whisper sighed. It sounded like a page turning in the dark. "You used to dream, Oliver. You dreamed of stories, of people, of worlds no one had seen. But when the world told you to grow up, you stopped believing. You stopped writing. You forgot." Oliver looked down at the book again. The pages began to turn on their own, faster and faster, until they stopped at a page filled with drawings. His drawings. From when he was a child, a small boy standing under a tree, looking at the stars. The words beneath it read, "Someday, I will build a world made of dreams." He felt tears in his eyes. "I remember that," he whispered. "I used to draw that all the time." The voice around him softened, almost like a lullaby. "And you did. Every dream you ever had still exists here. You built this library without knowing it. Every forgotten piece of your heart became a book." Oliver's knees weakened. He dropped to the floor, surrounded by thousands of silent books, each one glowing faintly, like sleeping souls waiting to wake. "Then why can't I remember?" he asked. The whisper hesitated, then gently, "Because remembering hurts. You buried your dreams to protect yourself from the pain of losing them." Oliver wiped his face, the words echoing inside him like thunder. "Then, what happens now?" For a long moment, there was silence. Then, a single book, high on the top shelf, slid out and fell open before him. On the last page were 4 words, written in gold ink. "The dream is waking." The lights in the library flickered. The ground trembled slightly, and Oliver suddenly understood. The library wasn't just remembering him. It was calling him back. The dream that called him back. The library trembled as if it were breathing, deep, slow, and alive. Books began to slide from their shelves, fluttering open in midair like frightened birds. Each page shimmered with faint golden light. Oliver stood, shielding his face, as the air around him filled with flying paper. "What's happening?" he shouted over the rising hum. "You're remembering," the whisper said, not fearful, but full of awe. "The library is opening to you again." The words made no sense, and yet they did. Something deep inside him stirred, something older than memory, older than fear. He took a step forward. The light grew stronger. In the far end of the room, a spiral staircase appeared, where none had been before. It seemed to rise endlessly upward, glowing softly in the dimness. Oliver hesitated only a moment, then began to climb. Each step hummed beneath his feet, as though it recognized his touch. And as he ascended, he saw scenes floating beside him, not painted, not projected, but alive. A boy writing stories in the glow of candlelight. A teenager tearing his notebook apart after being told, "Dreams don't pay the bills." A young man walking away from the stories he once loved. He stopped. Those weren't just anyone's memories. They were his. His chest tightened. "I did forget," he whispered. "I really did." "But you can remember," the whisper replied, now sounding closer, almost inside his heart. "You can write again." At the top of the stairs was a great wooden door, carved with thousands of names. Some he recognized. People he had once loved. People he had once imagined. And in the center, glowing faintly, was his own name. He reached out. The moment his fingers touched the door, the library fell completely silent. The light faded. The whisper stopped. And then, the door opened inward. Inside was not another room. It was a sky. A vast, endless sky filled with floating pages, drifting like stars. Each page held a fragment of a dream. Laughter, love, sorrow, hope. They circled around him slowly, as if greeting their creator. Oliver stepped forward, weightless now. He reached for one of the pages. It glowed brighter at his touch. And suddenly he was standing in a memory. A warm summer evening, sitting under the old tree near his childhood home. watching the first fireflies appear. He could hear his younger self laughing, whispering to the stars, "Someday, I'll make stories that never fade." Oliver closed his eyes. The tears came quietly this time, not of sadness, but of recognition. "You already did," the whisper said softly. "You just needed to come home to remember." The stars pulsed brighter, and the library around him began to dissolve into light, pages spinning upward, carrying dreams back into the world. Oliver smiled through his tears. He finally understood. The library wasn't a prison of forgotten dreams. It was a promise that no dream is ever truly lost. The library reborn. When Oliver opened his eyes, he was no longer floating among pages of light. He was standing once again in the quiet old library. But everything was different now. The dust was gone. The shelves stood tall and gleaming, and the books pulsed softly, as if breathing in unison. Warm sunlight poured through tall windows that hadn't been there before. He turned slowly, in awe. Everywhere he looked, the library lived. The air smelled of ink and jasmine. The wooden floor beneath his feet hummed faintly, like the heartbeat of a sleeping giant. "You remembered," the whisper said, its voice now clear, kind, and full of peace. "The library has awakened because you did." Oliver placed a hand over his chest. Something inside him felt whole. He hadn't realized how empty he'd been until that emptiness was gone. "What happens now?" he asked quietly. The whisper seemed to smile through the air. "Now, the library doesn't belong to you alone. It belongs to everyone who dares to dream." As those words echoed, the walls around him shimmered, and through them, he saw the world outside. Children laughing, people painting, writing, creating again. Every forgotten dream that had once gathered dust here was finding its way back to its owner. A little girl in a hospital bed smiled as she drew a picture of the moon. An old man opened his violin case for the first time in 20 years. A woman started to write a letter she'd been too afraid to begin. The light of the library flowed into their lives like morning sun through an open window. Oliver felt his throat tighten. He whispered, "So, all of this, it was never just about me." "No," the voice replied gently. "But it had to start with you. One dream remembered becomes 1,000 reborn." He smiled faintly, looking down at the book still in his hands. His book. Its pages now glowed softly, filled to the brim with new words. The final line read, "And so he became the guardian of dreams, the one who remembered so others could too." The whisper faded, leaving only the quiet turning of pages and the warmth of sunlight. Oliver walked toward the door, feeling the cool breeze of the outside world, but as he stepped out, he heard one last voice, faint but clear. "Don't forget again." He turned, smiled, and whispered back, "I won't." When he stepped into the street, the library behind him shimmered once more and disappeared. But somewhere, in the hearts of those who still dared to dream, its doors remained open forever. The Guardian of Dreams. Days passed, then weeks. But something inside Oliver had changed forever. He no longer walked through life half awake. He noticed things now: the laughter of children in the park, the stories hidden in strangers' eyes, the quiet poetry of rain on rooftops. Everywhere he went, he carried a small notebook. At cafes, on trains, beneath trees, he wrote. He wrote about people, about moments, about dreams that the world had forgotten, and something magical began to happen. Wherever he wrote, others started to remember too. A barista who once loved to paint began sketching again between coffee orders. A taxi driver hummed an old song from his childhood. A student, tired and lost, read one of Oliver's stories online and decided not to give up. It was as if the light of the library had followed him into the real world, quietly awakening every heart it touched. One evening, as the sun melted into gold, Oliver sat by the river with his notebook open. A little boy stopped beside him and asked, "Are you a writer?" Oliver smiled. "I guess I am," he said softly. "I write about dreams." The boy tilted his head curiously. "Do dreams ever get lost?" Oliver looked out across the water. For a moment he saw the faint reflection of tall, endless shelves and books made of light, the library, watching him still. Then he turned back to the boy and smiled gently. "Sometimes," he said, "people forget their dreams, but dreams never forget the people who dreamed them." The boy thought for a moment, then grinned. "Then I'll keep mine safe." Oliver nodded. "That's all any of us have to do." The boy ran off down the path, his laughter echoing in the fading light. Oliver closed his notebook. He could feel the whisper again, faint but warm. Not a voice from another world anymore, but a part of him. "The library lives," it said, "as long as someone dares to dream." Oliver smiled, looking at the sky as the first stars appeared, and for the first time in a long, long while, he didn't just feel alive. He felt infinite. The end, but not really. Because as long as someone somewhere dreams, the library of forgotten dreams is still open. And maybe that's what this story was really about. Not a library made of magic or light, but the one we all carry inside. Every time we stop dreaming, a door closes. Every time we remember who we are, it opens again. Dreams aren't meant to be perfect. They're meant to be lived. And sometimes, even a forgotten dream can find its way back home. So tonight, before you sleep, close your eyes and listen. Can you hear it? That soft whisper calling your name? Maybe it's your own library of forgotten dreams waiting for you to come back. If this story touched your heart, even just a little, don't forget to give it a like. Share it with someone who might need to remember their dream tonight. And if you love learning English through beautiful stories like this one, subscribe now and turn on the notification bell so you'll never miss our next journey. Thank you so much for listening, my friends. Keep dreaming, keep learning, and never forget, The library of your heart is always open.